Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another Sutta study this week, starting off with Ayya Soma. So this morning we'll be taking a look at a sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. And if you'd like to follow along, you can click the link in the live chat. I think that's a different translation than the one you'll be using. And if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them in and we'll address them at the end of the talk. And good morning so far to Elaine, Read with me, Michael, Amaranta, Melissa, Jens, Robin, Yudi, and Ayya Vimalanyani. Good to see you, Venerable. And welcome as well to all others watching, but not typing in just yet. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Ayya Soma for this morning's sutta study.
All right. Thank you, Bhante Sumanam, and thank you all for joining once again for Sutta study. So we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So since this is one of those short suttas, maybe we can read it all in one shot first, so you can have the opportunity to reflect on it without me conditioning your mind. And then we can analyze it together later. So I will be reading from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, and I believe that Bhante Sumano put Bhante Sujato's translation on from Sutta Central. So the sutta begins. Bhikkhus, there are these 5 kinds of mental barrenness. What 5? Here a bhikkhu is perplexed about the teacher, doubts him, is not convinced about him, and does not place confidence in him. When a bhikkhu is perplexed about the teacher, doubts him, is not convinced about him, and does not place confidence in him, his mind does not incline to ardor, effort, perseverance, and striving. Since his mind does not incline to ardor all the way to striving, this is the first kind of mental barrenness. Again, a bhikkhu is perplexed about the Dhamma, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it. When a bhikkhu is perplexed about the Dhamma, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it, his mind does not incline to ardor, effort, perseverance, and striving. Since his mind does not incline to ardor and striving, this is the second kind of mental barrenness. Again, a bhikkhu is perplexed about the Sangha, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it. When a bhikkhu is perplexed about the Sangha, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it, his mind does not incline to ardor, effort, perseverance, and striving. Since his mind does not incline to ardor and striving, this is the third kind of mental barrenness. Again, a bhikkhu is perplexed about the training, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it. When a bhikkhu is perplexed about the training, doubts it, is not convinced about it, and does not place confidence in it, his mind does not incline to ardor, effort, perseverance, and striving. Since his mind does not incline to ardor and striving, this is the fourth kind of mental barrenness. Again, a bhikkhu is irritated by his fellow monks, displeased with them, resentful toward them, ill-disposed toward them. When a bhikkhu is irritated by his fellow monks, displeased with them, resentful toward them, ill-disposed toward them, his mind does not incline to ardor, effort, perseverance, and striving. Since his mind does not incline to ardor and striving, this is the fifth kind of mental barrenness. These bhikkhus are the 5 kinds of mental barrenness. So we can take a few moments to reflect on these verses. So, Dhammasuka. Did we see anything that sort of spoke to our experience, something that we're doing, something that reflects our mind, something, or perhaps the opposite, actually. That would be the most ideal condition. Or like, this does not apply, this does not apply, this does not apply, this does not apply, this does not apply. Oh, what a great place to be, this mind. But if that's not the case, then we can actually have a sense, have a taste of the mental barrenness. So, Cetokila, which, by the way, there is actually another sutta, the Cetokila Sutta, I believe is called as well, right? Correct, Bante? In the Majjhima Nikaya, which is a little bit longer and gives a little bit more detail. But today we'll focus on the sort of short on the cliff notes of the Cetokila Sutta. But yeah, the part that is translated as barrenness, so kila, is very interesting in Pali because it also means wasteland, obstruction. I delight. Now that I started translating in Pali, I always look up the etymology of the words, and they're so great. I get more and more into it because it gives you so much context for the mental experiences in a way that any type of translation kind of like sort of misses a little bit the point. So anyway, so the first type of mental barrenness, the first way through which we create a wasteland in our mind is by nourishing doubt on the teacher. So who is the teacher? Well, Bhikkhu Bodhi makes sure that we're not confused, and he puts the capital T on the teacher. And so that is our original teacher, to whom we've paid homage at the beginning of this talk, the Buddha. So you might think, how can I, doubt the Buddha? The Buddha is dead, perhaps. I haven't really met him, so how can I be, convinced about him or place confidence in him or not, or perplexed? I don't really have a relationship with the teacher. And actually, the Buddha, it's kind of connected to the second mental barrenness. When, on the point of his deathbed, when people were, or actually as he was going, about to die, people were very concerned. How are we going to do it? How are we going to navigate the world without you, without the teacher? And he says, fundamentally, that when you see the Dhamma, you see me. So perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that when we reach the second mental barrenness. But fundamentally, I would say that this first point of relating to the teacher is, how are we relating to the Buddha? Right now, do we think of him as a common human being, or do we think of the Buddha as an angelic being? Do we think of the Buddha as a god? Do we think of the Buddha as being someone culturally conditioned, perhaps, by the times? Do we think of the Buddha as an enlightened being, as in fact the supreme teacher? Or do we think of the Buddha as one of those people in history that shared, an interesting philosophy, and perhaps we can, pick and choose what is relevant to us? How are we relating to the statues, for example, of the Buddha? Are we just relating to them as pretty objects? Or are we relating to them as something supreme? I remember when I was reading the book Forest Recollections, there were actually so many different accounts of all the monks in Thailand and how they were relating to image of the Buddha, whether it was an actual statue or whether it was a little icon that they were carrying together. And in general, also any Buddhist who is born Buddhist, there is that immediate reverence and sense of preciousness, and the idea that whenever we have a statue of the Buddha, it's actually having the presence of the Buddha here. It's not just some pretty artifact, but rather the embodiment of enlightenment, of awakening right here. And it's always inspired me, because as someone who, on the other hand, was raised in a very pretty country, actually, with a lot of pretty religious iconography. I never really related to the religious iconography from Christianity in that way. But rather I was like, oh, this is a beautiful Giotto, this is a beautiful Michelangelo, this is, oh, I like, this style better than this other style. I like the Renaissance refigurations much better than the Rococo. That's a little bit too over the top. And at the very beginning, I was relating a little bit like that to the Buddha, to the Buddha images as well. Until I saw that it was actually, creating a bit of mental barrenness. My mind was a bit of a wasteland. So now, on the other hand, I'm getting closer and closer to devotional practices, recollecting the qualities, the incredible qualities of the Buddha. Actually, during our winter retreat, I would spend lots of hours. I particularly like this Buddha image and the Buddha image, the statue that we have outside. They evoke incredible peace, incredible qualities. So it was very beautiful to, once again, recollect the incredible qualities of the Buddha. What make the Buddha special? And most importantly, the qualities that we can actually, thanks to his teachings, we can actually start embodying as well. And it's incredible. I had actually hardly ever recollected the qualities of the Buddha during all my years of practice. But when I did it, incredible happiness started arising in my mind. And it was so much easier than to practice samadhi, practice anything, actually. Also, just be a good person. Practice sila. Fundamentally, basically, practicing anything, sila, samadhi, and panya. With that wish of emulating the Buddha and understanding that we have the capability of becoming a Buddha. That it's not something that we only, it's not just an icon that we worship. It's just not an idea of something that is far away, that it's unreachable. But rather it's the capability that each one of us has. We all have the potential of becoming a perfect being. Isn't that incredible? And then we see the teachings of the Buddha, as we were saying, the Dhamma. And what happens when we start doubting the Dhamma? When we start doubting, not placing confidence in it. So first of all, we see we can, the Buddha actually gives us in other occasions throughout the suttas, he gives us some pointers of how we are not taking the Dhamma seriously or not embracing the Dhamma. And it first of all comes to how are we listening to the Dhamma? How are we approaching the Dhamma? Are we chatting perhaps with others? Are we distracted? Are we going on our, planning for perhaps now here at the monastery? After this, we're going to have a work period. So all the different checklists and what are we supposed to be doing? And I have this responsibility or another responsibility. Or perhaps you have to go to work after this talk. Or perhaps there's a show happening if it's like another time of the day around the world, whatever it is. But when the Dhamma is being brought up, how are we pointing our mind? If we are pointing our minds, are we checking our phones? Or are we listening actually to the Dhamma with the intent of criticizing the Dhamma, or criticizing the speaker, or finding fault in what they're about to say? Actually, I recently gave a talk online where I was very much feeling that even though it was online, even though it was virtually, interestingly enough, there was a very strong sense of the audience paying very close attention to the choice of words that I was using, paying very close attention to whether the words that I was saying were matching what they thought I was supposed to say, with the intent of finding, a little bit of a gap there. It's very uncomfortable, actually, I have to say. Not looking forward to repeating that again. I was like, oh, okay. I know it on the receiving end now, but have I done that in the past? The answer is yes, actually. I have indeed so. And so whenever we do that, actually, that creates a hindrance in our understanding and our ability to understand the Dhamma. So it's interesting because when I think in hindsight, some of the biggest insights that I had in the Dhamma were actually from the worst, quote unquote, teachers that I encountered. In the moment where I actually stopped my criticizing mind, stopped going, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. Oh, I know better than them, even though I'm not even ordained. What are they doing? Or vice versa, like that whole, conceit of superiority. Then when I would stop that, because perhaps it was a, very long retreat or whatever it is, couldn't leave anymore. So I would sometimes you also get tired of yourself, like you're just like, whatever, shut up. But whenever that would happen, actually, there was this sort of openness and freedom for, even if 99% of it was rubbish, that 1% then would actually be able to, be planted and flourish. Some of the biggest, actually, insights on karma I learned by, quote unquote, the worst teachers when I had that approach. Very interesting. The other thing related to this is also, how when we're approaching the Dhamma, we think we have understood what we have actually not understood. So instead of investigating the Dhamma, we're so sure that this is how things are that we somewhat, put it on top of the Dhamma, and that is the true meaning. And when questioned, we're like, well, it's just a matter of opinions. Your opinion is just as good as mine. Yeah, well, the Buddha says no killing, but or not, not stealing. But I'm pretty sure that stealing for corporations is all right because corporations are evil. And so that's what, that's my opinion. And your opinion is that the Buddha says that there is no stealing and no killing. And no killing, I also like to kill whatever ants, they're annoying. That's when we think we have understood. And there is no room for questioning our understanding, so to speak, of the Dhamma. Another common way through which we start doubting the Dhamma is by turning the Dhamma into something that is dated. Especially whenever we encounter things in the suttas, it's very easy to dismiss them as something that was happening in, or said, or done 2,500 years ago. So clearly it's not relevant today anymore. This I find very, very common amongst us converts. And that's because we're used to dealing with things that are dated. Well, definitely if you come from, Europe, everything is dated. You are raised in a country that is layers of dated, So, and there's a millenary culture, so there is so much information, so much knowledge. So you're very much used to that. Perhaps in the US, instead there is, bit of a newness factor. So then anything that is not, produced by this incredibly technological society, then somewhat has that sense of, I don't know, so long ago in such a different country. Clearly, for example, the Buddha, getting back to what we were saying earlier on the first point, clearly the Buddha was conditioned by his times. So is it the Buddha, is it the Dhamma conditioned by its time, or is it perhaps us conditioned by our times? Or conditioned by our conceit of superiority? Thinking that perhaps our culture is superior to other cultures, hence by default we authorize ourselves to somewhat edit. Like, okay, this sounds all right, but this one, I don't know, I'll toss it. Yeah, I don't know about this karma and rebirth thing. I'm pretty sure why he was conditioned by the times, because, other sects in Hinduism believe in karma and rebirth. So clearly that's not something that the Buddha, was really saying intentionally. I know better. Definitely YOLO is where it's at, because that's definitely not conditioned by Abrahamic religions, isn't it? So we see that our biases are then put on the Dhamma, which then actually, we're not only questioning certain parts of the Dhamma, we start questioning everything else. Because our priorities become something else. Our priorities become our pre-existing ideas, our pre-existing ideals, our, whatever we study in university, or whatever we study or we talk about with our friends, or whatever our family taught us, rather than the Dhamma. And of course, this doubt creates this, unfertile ground. Very few things grow in them. Actually, that was last year's soil here at Empty Cloud. Whatever you would, put in this soil, it's pretty unfertile. It'd have a very difficult time growing. But as we, didn't use our leaf blowers to throw away all the nourishment of the soils, etc., this year it's incredible. We didn't even have to do anything. And apparently seeds from last year started sprouting. The plants are very strong, and whatever was planted last year has a different color altogether. Because we embraced, actually, the natural process. We didn't do anything here at Empty Cloud. We were meditating. We were doing our winter retreat. But nature took care of everything. Nature took care of nourishing the soil. So in the same way, we should let the Dhamma, really embrace it. Take it as a working hypothesis. Worship it. Put it as the foremost, as the actual path to liberation. And then everything is nourished. We just need to practice. We don't need to question what is, what is there. We don't need to question whether and think intellectually whether karma and rebirth exists or not, whether we should believe in it or not, but rather practice as if that's how things are and see how it affects your mind. And then it's not a matter of belief anymore. You stop seeing the world in a different way. Yeah, just the shift. I don't think I ever there was one day where I was like, okay, I am going to believe in karma and rebirth. But rather, there was a day where I was like, okay, I'm going to take this as a working hypothesis. And once I took it as a working hypothesis, it was impossible to go back. Because it's nonsensical, actually, to live in a world where you see cause and effect in everything. And then you just pretend that there are two things that have no cause and no effect. There's some random things, arbitrarily in nature. And then we see that the sutta proceeds with doubting the Sangha, not placing confidence in the Sangha. So who is the Sangha? So we have the Ayya Sangha and the common Sangha. The Ayya Sangha is the Sangha of enlightened beings. So people who had no mental barrenness and actually practiced the teachings of the Buddha and became just like the Buddha. Countless beings. And then there is the common Sangha, me being a representative of them, as well as other people that have the great fortune to don this robe. We're putting, we're still trying our best with the aspiration of becoming like the Ayya Sangha. And so how are we relating to both the Ayya Sangha and the common Sangha in our mind? Whether we are monastics or we are lay people is very important. That is what nourishes our path. So from the external forms that we use in relating to one another and relating to others, and also in our internal forms. So for example, during the Sutta the Buddha invited everyone, but obviously lay followers in particular, since the monastics are already we're constantly on the 8 precepts, you would hope, since we have other precepts as well, to live like an arahant. Fundamentally, have that sense of a real connection with the Ayya Sangha, and relate to the common Sangha as a representative of the Ayya Sangha, as a symbol of the most precious, one of the 3 jewels. And we can learn a lot, actually, from people who are born in Buddhist countries if we are not. Because sometimes, if we are not, we can relate to this robe, whether we are wearing it ourselves or we see others wearing it in a very, superficial way. Also a disrespectful way, actually. Just like a funny outfit. Remember when Bhante Sudaso had moved to New York City, and at a certain point we were in a cool neighborhood in Brooklyn, and this person saw him and was like, oh my God, where can I get one of those? That's so cool. Because we relate to it as something, cool. Or perhaps something just weird. That was another experience that we would have when we're walking in other neighborhoods of New York City. What is that person? Why are they wearing that weird outfit? And also they have no hair. What does that mean? Once again, seeing the value of this, the incredible meaning, the meaning of liberation, the meaning that it's actually possible for each one of us, just by following the teachings of the Buddha, to become like the Buddha. It's incredible. Also recollected the Sangha, recollected the Dhamma, recollected the Sangha. Very great, great practices. Then you can add recollecting your own goodness, and then you're recollecting the devas, that you're just like the devas. You have the same potential, same qualities. It's very beautiful practices. And actually connected to the practice of recollecting our own goodness and being like the devas, we see the Buddha talks about us being perplexed about the training, doubting it, not being convinced about it, and not placing confidence in it. So what is this training? So these are training rules that both lay people and monastics have. So starting from the 5 precepts for the lay people, then going to the 8 precepts or 10 precepts, or racking them up to 311, and for us bhikkhunis, or 227, right, for the bhikkhus. So understanding what is the purpose for all of these rules. Sometimes we can relate to these precepts as commandments, as things that we are ought to do in order to become a good Buddhist. But in reality, what these training rules are blessings to create conditions for us to train our mind to create wholesome qualities and then be able to recollect them. To recollect the fact, for example, that we haven't killed a sentient being. It's incredible. I haven't killed a sentient being in 6 years, however long that is. Yeah, 6 years. That's incredible. Incredible. If I think of my mind before taking the precepts, I was killing tons of sentient beings. I was the Angulimala of insects. Horrible. What an afflicted mind back then. And just by simply taking this training rule, as difficult as it was, it created the conditions that now I can recollect on that. And also see the beauty of a mind that does not want to kill, that doesn't kill and doesn't want to kill. And seeing the similarities with the devas, with higher beings. Yeah, in that respect, my mind is pretty angelic these days. Beautiful. Yeah, look, I'm like happy just by talking about it right now. Instant recollection. Well done, Soma. So yeah, in this way we approach these sort of rules and trainings with happiness. It's a really it's a beautiful practice. It's a gift that allows us to develop sila, samadhi, and panya. And of course, it requires a lot of strength, whether we're monastics or lay people. You know, the Buddha is very clear on that. If we're lay people, we're going to be surrounded by lots of people who will be killing all the time, for example. Or we'll be drinking, or we'll be stealing, or we'll be doing all sorts of sexual misconduct, or yeah, you name it. So how do we protect our mind? By recommitting to the teachings. We do what is hard to do. The Buddha says, actually, invites us monks to recollect whether or not other monks train, I will train. So even as monastics, we can be surrounded by practitioners that are a little bit careless, are perhaps not putting this as the foremost. We can become very complacent in robes. It's hard to do this work. This is the hardest thing that I've done. And it was so funny. We went to Google once, the headquarters, not online. And one of the lay people there was like, hey, it's interesting, the type of work that you're doing. I'm a really ambitious person, so I don't think I could do that. There are so many things that I want to do. And I looked at him, because I used to be a very ambitious layperson, and I'm still a very ambitious monastic. Actually, I've never been so ambitious. I remember thinking, I was like, you think you're ambitious? This is the most ambitious thing that you can do to remove greed, hatred, and delusion from your mind. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. My whole resume is gets stuff done. Also, as a monastic, I get stuff done, but not the stuff that needs to be actually done. Have I finished? Which is remove greed, hatred, and delusion. But yeah, I can put lots of effort in building things, creating things. But that's not the most ambitious thing. The most ambitious thing is to practice the Dhamma and realize it. That's the hardest and most ambitious thing. And it's interesting when we relate to these precepts, because if it's up until the fifth, we're kind of like, okay, maybe I can understand, I get like a bunch of points, etc. But once we start racking them up, especially the Mani precept, especially in the West, we can have so many different long excuses of why it's not practical anymore to do it in 2021, whatever year we are. I keep on, I'm getting older, so now I'm stuck to 2008, so I have to do the math every time. 2021, we live in a different society. We live in the United States, so realistically, that precept is not really feasible, and then there's these other precepts that are not feasible, and there's this whole endless list. I noticed that for the most part, actually it's not true, both. I would say this is like an omnipresent thing, East and West. And it's the defilements of mind that fundamentally get us to approach this practice. Especially, not being in a place like Thailand, where people actually put really so much effort. I remember I was going on alms round with Bhante Sudasa on the street, and with another venerable as well. And at a certain point, these people on a scooter, I saw that they passed by, and then they how do you say it? Slammed on the brakes. That's the English. Slammed on the brakes. Drove to a stand, got a bunch of food, and drove back and gave us the offering. And I was like, wow, that's really impressive in terms of the effort that, they spotted a monk and they were like, this is an incredible opportunity to make merit. We should not, let it go past. And this was one of the few episodes that I saw. Actually, it was like that all the time. It was incredible to see how beautiful a Buddhist country is in that way. very different than the experience of going alms around here. I have to say, in West Orange, it's actually very pleasant. But when we were in New York City, it was more like, what are these people doing? Go get a job. You dress weird, you look weird, and you're also unemployed. Like come on, please. All right, at least you wash. That's okay. You don't stink yet. It was like really not, the best of things. So the type of food that you get, how long can you go with muffins or well, actually sometimes we get blueberries. That's more nutritious. But it was very interesting to see how then the mind would go, oh well, in the West, all the people in the West have bad karma, so like they won't really support monastics, so we should all like just get our livelihood in a different way. Or we can actually start saying, oh, these terrible people, they should be supporting us. So, well, the Buddha said that it's important to support monastics. Well, I say that that's not really the path towards enlightenment, but that's more the path towards entitlement, which is really not the purpose why we put these robes all together. I got to say that all these precepts are so inconvenient. They are really inconvenient. And they're designed to be inconvenient. Whenever there are not these precepts in place, like for example, the monastic communities in Italy. When have I ever met a monk in Italy? Being born and bred there for 30 years, zero. And that's why because they were self-sufficient. They didn't need. There weren't these precepts in place to create this symbiotic relationship between monastics and lay people. And so we go, in a place like Thailand today, and it's so easy to say, oh, look at the Thai people. They're such superior, beings that are so generous, is so incredible. And, I haven't been to Sri Lanka, but I imagine it's the same way from interactions with Singhala people or Burmese people or any type of Asian Buddhist person. Very incredible generosity, incredible understanding of the value of the Sangha. So it's very easy to say, well, those people are really generous and all the Westerners, well, all going to go to hell as if brought there. But is it truly like that, actually? We visited this monk, one of my favorite monks, actually, that I've met in this lifetime, Ajahn Piyasilo in the north of Thailand. And it was so beautiful. At a certain point, he was telling me the story of Ajahn Chah going on to Dong in Thailand back in the day, and he hadn't had food for days. And then he goes past this stand, and there's this lady that was selling, a bunch of different things, and she had a little bit of rice and then lots of different types of food. And then there was this tree with like actually overproducing fruit. And anyway, so she gives him a little bit of rice, actually. So she was quite generous to begin with. And he was like pretty grateful about the rice. And he spent some time in that area. So then the second day he stops by and he's like, we can't ask directly for things. So he started inquiring about the tree. And it was like, oh, what type of tree is that? What kind of fruit is that? And the lady answered, gave all the information. Just gave him a little bit of rice and that was it. And then the third day he, asked more questions about the fruit tree, and she gave him only a little bit of rice. And the fourth day, as this happened again, it was his last day in the area. He said, as he left, Great. Well, next time you see a monk, you should offer him some of that fruit. I remember Ajahn Piasilo sharing this story with me and turning around, looking at me, making eye contact, and then asking me, do you understand? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And I did. So I ask you, do you understand what I'm trying to say? So fundamentally, the message of the story is that one needs to create the conditions out of compassion for future generations, not for us. But the reason why actually today we go to Thailand and, there are people that, pull the brakes, whatever that thing you say in English.
Slam on the brakes.
Slam on the brakes. I'm going to eventually learn that idiom. Slam on the brakes and want to make merit and offer food to the monastics was not like that from day one. But rather, it was the power of taking these precepts, practicing these precepts, and the heritage, the inheritance that monastics who have taught in these areas have left us. And so it's our duty, I think, as monastics in the West to really understand this and to practice, take these teachings as hard and as difficult as it is, and create the conditions for lay people to be generous. So it's not something that we do for ourselves. So much easier. I know how to plant things. I know how to grow things. I know how to cook things. I could just really live in a hermitage, there's this saying, hell is other people. So having to interact and do all of that actually can be pretty hellish if we take it with the wrong sort of attitude. So the point of these precepts is actually to allow people to be generous, but passing this on. And I actually told partially the story of Ajahn Piasilo and Ajahn Chah. Realistically, the first one who did this work was the Buddha. That's why the Buddha tells us that we are not that we're in debt as monastics until we attain awakening. Why do people offer us food? Why do people offer us requisites? It's not because we're that great, or that they were waiting for Ayya Soma to, ordain and from Italy and come to the United States. No, nobody cares about me. Nobody cares about Bhante Sudaso. Nobody cares about Bhante Sumana. Nobody cares about Bhante Vajira. Nobody cares about Tangang. Maybe they care about Tangang. He's cool. Nobody cares about Ayya Suvijana, but they care about the samana. They care about the practice. They care about the triple gem. And that's because the Buddha was an enlightened being that created this tradition. The Buddha was someone who was worthy of offerings and ordained others who then became worthy of offerings too, because they got rid of their defilements. So there is this preciousness in this path, this preciousness of understanding that this is the supreme work. But this does not come from, just that we're entitled to this. We are very privileged because we come from this inheritance. So our duty is to practice sincerely, honestly, as much as possible. It was so beautiful to actually see that. How Ajahn Piasilo, for example, was an embodiment of Dhamma. It was one of the poorest parts of Thailand that we visited. And it was so incredible to see how people were supporting the temple with the few little means that they could. And he had no expectation, no sort of, I should be having this or this other thing extra. But yeah, one of the most content monastics. Actually, one of the reasons why I stayed in robes. There was a moment where I was like, it's a little difficult, this condition with this body in particular, for other reasons, not for the precepts, but for other reasons. But then I was like, actually, I can become like the Buddha. But if I don't become like the Buddha this time, which, the chances are high, if I become like Ajahn Piasira, I'm really happy. That's doable. I can do it. So incredibly inspiring embodiments of Dhamma. And so we see how important it is to train our mind. Sometimes here in the West, we can get so full of ourselves and like dismiss all this incredible heritage that we have and just focus on what we think is developing the mind in terms of concentration or in terms of mindfulness. But the Buddha is actually very clear. So I wanted to quote actually from, I think this is Sariputta, not the Buddha, but he's talking to the Buddha, and the Buddha gives the stamp of approval. And he says, it is impossible, Bhante, that a bhikkhu who lacks reverence for the teacher, the Dhamma and the Sangha and the training could have reverence for concentration. The bhikkhu who lacks reverence for the teacher, the Dhamma and the Sangha and the training also lacks reverence for concentration. And then in the following paragraph, he says, if you lack reverence for all of this, you also lack reverence for heedfulness, in other words, for mindfulness. So it's not cute things that, religious people do. All these devotional practices that we can skip. No, these are nourishment for the soil. So you can have the best seed that you want, the best plant that you want, but if you put it in barren and unfertile soil, nothing will grow. So it's important to cultivate the mind, to really nourish it. Really understand the importance of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And the importance of the training, the importance of the precepts. Putting these as the foremost. As the objective of our life. The goal. Otherwise, we'll just keep on spinning around in circles and following all our different defilements. So then what's the point? Well, at least then enjoy sensual pleasures instead of, having to do all this like half-assed renunciation. So very important not to dismiss a tradition. It is a tradition because it works. And lastly, we see the fifth and last thing is getting irritating by his fellow monks, fellow practitioners. We're all here like laughing. Oops, guilty of charge. Whoopsie. I was doing all right up until the fourth. But, and it's kind of cute because it's really the most human thing. As monastics, especially, we all know, if we've had relationships in the past as lay people, we knew that it was difficult already to be okay with one person or multiple people if you're in such things as well, in such relationships as well. But consensual, hopefully, relationships. Anyway, one person is enough, but you had actually picked that person. But with monastic life, you don't really pick those people. So it's kind of like a hit or miss. And more often it's a miss than it's a hit. So how do you navigate this landscape? Well, normally, displeased with them, resentful toward them, ill-disposed towards them, we start creating all these movies. Oh, this person had these intentions, these other intentions. Maybe if we're sophisticated enough, we start thinking, oh, actually, perhaps they're from a different culture. So, maybe Ayya Soma is not that horrible person that I was thinking she was. Maybe, she's just from Italy, and, they're a little bit underdeveloped in Italy. So she's not very skillful with words or with acts. But no, most often than not, we just expect Ayya Soma to be like, very perfect. And we just generate all this resentment towards her. But anyway, so what are we doing with our minds? This can also happen actually during meditation retreats, even with strangers. I definitely was guilty of charge of that multiple times. I remember being at Bhavana Society, I was so blissed out. And then at a certain point, this person next to me started having this breathing difficulty and making so many noises. And at the first few moments, I was like, yeah, equanimity, everything is okay. And then I was like, oh, no, are they stopping? They're like destroying my meditation, up to wanting to stab the poor person that just had a little bit of a sniffling problem. Craziness that happens in our minds. Well, back then I had to acknowledge that clearly that hatred was impeding me from nourishing wholesome qualities. Actually, I was there practicing meditation to remove defilements. Instead, I was practicing increasing defilements. I hate this, I don't like this, it has to stop. Then I would come out of the cushion. I hate this, I don't like this, it has to stop. Basically, I spent 3 days of cultivating hatred until luckily I got ahead of, aware of the mind, what I was doing to myself, and stopped. Because we should, really give us some pep talks. And so when we do this, it's important to understand that we're fostering anger, hatred, or fostering delusion. We're fundamentally spreading salt in the earth. So perhaps our earth is not fertile at all. It's not fertile already. So what we do is make sure that it won't be for the rest of foreseeable future. So like we start sprinkling salt. I think it was like also a war practice, right? To spread salt in the fields so that then people could not grow anything for long periods of time. So that's basically what we do when we are having this sort of approach with other practitioners. We think perhaps that we are, getting things out of our system. Ranting about others can have that nice relief, whether we're doing with other practitioners or in our minds. Ranting has that initial sort of release from suffering. That's the gratification, as the Buddha says. If there weren't gratification in these things, we wouldn't do it, because we're crazy, but not that crazy. So there has to be something delicious that is there, and that is the deliciousness. We also feel right, we're like, yes, I'm totally right, If this person weren't breathing strongly or, had remembered to do their chore, then I would be in a clean meditation hall without any smell or without any sound, and I could be focusing on my samadhi object. I would be enlightened by now. We always have so many stories on how if only those conditions were in place, we would be enlightened. It's also incredible because whenever I meet practitioners who have those conditions, they're still not enlightened, and they start looking at other conditions. So perhaps it's not the conditions, perhaps it's our craving for the conditions, right? But that's always right. But yeah, getting back to the hatred, that is the easiest way to make sure that there is no way, no matter how hard we try, we can't recollect the Buddha, we can't recollect the Dhamma, we can't recollect the Sangha. We can't have an appreciation for the training if there is so much anger and hatred in our minds. So how does the Buddha describe, a good a good practitioner. The Buddha says in Anguttara Nikaya 813, mild and pleasant to live with, does not agitate others, reveals their tricks, ploys, gambits, and wiles as they really are to the teacher, wise fellow monks, so they can make an effort to stamp them out of them. So basically being fully transparent, also with our defilements. Not going and trying to create discord, disharmony, but cooling ourselves down and cooling others who are agitating down, but also most importantly, being okay with sharing our defilements. I mean, it's clear we wouldn't be, practitioners. We wouldn't be dedicated to the path if we were perfect. We would just be sharing, teachings, and that's it. But in the process towards awakening, that's part of the training, to be really honest with ourselves and others. This is not beneficial. And it's okay. We can ask others for help. We are trembling together. And so instead of fostering anger, hatred, and whatnot, we can foster instead communal harmony, recollect why, if we're monastics, we're living together, or recollecting if we're meditating together, why, what is the purpose? If we're on retreat together, if we are at the monastery together, recollect. Why are we planting, flowers for the Buddha? Is it to get the job done? Well, there's landscapers for that. No, we're doing that to foster all of these wholesome qualities that prevent the mind from becoming barren. And communal harmony, getting along together, that's the most important thing that we should do, rather than fighting on which color or type of plant is better suited in the in the landscape. All right, so I completely disregarded the time, so we're running fashionably late, but I'm Italian, and so Bante Sudaso should be used to this.
Namayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
Thank you, Ayya Soma, for sharing that sutta with us and some wonderful reflections. And welcome as well to all those who joined in after we started. And so if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them in and we'll try to address them as best we can. And we do have one question from Michael that says, regarding the my idea / opinion versus yours, I try to practice lots of just don't know. This puts a lid on my opinions and ideas and opens my mind. Does this ring true related to your talk?
Yes, I would say that questioning our understanding is always good, but also at the same time, not risking to go to the opposite extreme that like, oh, well, I don't know anything, so I don't know, maybe, this teaching is right, but maybe it's not. And, just then we can actually risk to foster doubt. What is important, though, is whenever we encounter different opinions than ours, to go there not with the intention of trying to prove them wrong or to humiliate, so to speak, the person that we have in front of them, but rather to genuinely try to figure out why they hold this view. Basically with kind of like the intention of like, let's see if this person can convince me. What do they have on, what can they lay down on the table? And in that way, then we can grow in Dhamma. So for example, if the interpretation is solid, is rooted in Dhamma, then we have perhaps wrong view, then we can alter our wrong view. And vice versa, though. If what is presented to us is wrong view, then we can say, well, actually, that is not in accordance with the rest of the teachings, But always having that approach. Like, for example, when I was first introduced to it's bad karma being a female, well, it stung. It definitely stung. And my first reaction was like, well, that's BS. But then I was like, well, actually, that's not the appropriate response. What is if it's actually bad karma? And I'm, not really understanding how this is influencing my experience. So it's good to always take these as working hypothesis and then do the investigation, do the work, not just like take it. Oh, okay, it's bad karma. Well, this person seems like reputable enough and I'll take it. So that's falls under the realm of what the Buddha tells us what not to do in the Kalama Sutta. So not read it, not believe it just because someone tells you so, or because you read it in a book, or because whatever it is, different ideas, but rather do the actual investigation. So in the suttas, there is no mention of it's bad karma being a woman, so there's that. It being bad karma being a woman would make no sense in the scheme of Dhamma. So you start, flipping, switching the thing. So is it bad karma to have blue eyes, or to have lighter skin or darker skin, or one particular skin? That makes no sense. The Buddha is very clear about all of these are physical characteristics. So then you start distinguishing it, but you don't refuse it from the very beginning. These are actually gifts that are brought to us in our practice when we take them as gifts. They're like gifts in disguise. But if we take the time to really investigate why these things are adhamma rather than dhamma, then we have a better understanding of the teachings. But if we reject them or take them on without investigating, without doing the work, then we're not really growing in Dhamma. Well, we're not actually nourishing the mindfulness factor of investigating the Dhamma.
And we have a question from Anita who says, what would be the root of the doubts that are listed in the suttas?
Ignorance. Yeah, it's always one catch for all. How do you say it? Well, baba. Catch all.
And lots of thank yous and joy and appreciation for your sharing the Dhamma. Michael had another question, but it's probably best for monk chat on Friday evening since it's a bit more general. And there's a comment from Melissa who says, as a layperson, I believe I must live the practice, speak the Dharma Sutta stories, and share with people who are interested. And even if it's challenging, I found that by staying loyal and trusting and knowing in my heart to the process brings me lots of joy.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And Gita also says, thank you for your wonderful and amazing encouragement.
Oh, we just thank the Buddha. I mean, the enlightened stuff was the one that I read from the suttas.
And on Instagram, Milo Knots Us says, the Buddha's teachings have a bright peace to my life. It's the path to enlightenment. And Marielle says, my brother's in the hospital due to COVID. Please have him in your thoughts.
We sure will dedicate the chanting today to your brother. Can you send us actually his name, Marielle? So you can send it also via email if you don't want to write it in the chat.
And it seems like those were the final questions and comments for the morning, unless there's something from our in-person audience.
I wanted to say it was interesting that the first four is about doubt and the hindrance of doubt. And you were talking about investigation, and that's actually the antidote for doubt, to really, like you were saying, it's an ongoing hypothesis, and just really to investigate it. Oh, what is it like to actually put faith in the Buddha, and really investigating the teachings, and really, and inquiring with other also knowledgeable people. That's another way to overcome doubt. And then and then the final downfall is being grouchy with your fellow monastics. It's like, but the doubt in the when they talk about this, a simile for what doubt is being in the desert, and being at a crossroads and not knowing which direction to go, and then it's actually fatal. This is a fatal. So this is such a thank you for bringing up this sutta. This is such an important thing to contemplate, because it can be really fatal to our practice. All five of those.
Thank you so much, Ayya, for bringing all those points up. I think it can be heard, right, with the microphone, so I don't have to repeat it. But yeah, I personally saw it in my practice as well. Also, it's difficult, I think, for us female practitioners sometimes when we encounter certain ideas. For example, that really shook my faith in the Buddha being an actual enlightened being. So then we see how that mental barrenness starts happening, doubting the Dhamma, doubting the Sangha, doubting what am I doing here? Like, is this really a vehicle for awakening? And yeah, I've actually done all of it. I'm guilty of charge. I remember also when I started getting quote unquote woke instead of awakened, that then I would turn around and actually with poor Bhante Sudazo, and I was like, oh, a white male, the symbol of oppression, and nurturing all those unwholesome mind states that were really obstacles in the path. So yeah, until I personally took actually all of these as working hypothesis and did the work of investigating. Yes, I was in the desert, and it was a really uncomfortable place to be. But I could see a little oasis in the far shore. So I was like, how about I just take a little bit of that like water? Let's see if it's there and get some sustenance. And and then it's incredible when one really puts faith into this, then everything kind of like I guess it sheds light. That has been my experience. It sheds light on what kind of whatever doubt we were holding in our hearts, and gives us the strength to also bear the really uncomfortable situations that we can have in also this form, which I think is one of the most perfect states of existence, but it's still not perfect because I'm not enlightened, and all the other practitioners are not enlightened either. So it's still a struggle, but what are you gonna do?
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this morning, for your attention and questions and thoughts. And you can join us this evening at 7:30 p.m. for some guided meditation, as well as another Dhamma talk. But for the morning, we can end with 3 sadhus.
Oh, sorry, before we end with 3 sadhus, announcement. Actually, speaking of enlightened beings, we'll have very senior practitioner coming to join us. So Ajahn Pasano will be arriving soon, and he will be sharing the Dhamma. Ajahn Pasano is also Bhante Sudazo's preceptor, and he has spent many years, decades actually, in Thailand practicing with Ajahn Chah. And we'll be sharing Dhamma with us here at Empty Cloud, and also we'll be here at for our Vesak ceremony. So if you're close to Empty Cloud Monastery in New Jersey, you can come. You're invited to come on Sunday, and we'll have, I guess, a socially distant Vesak ceremony, trying to understand the new guidelines of, we're all vaccinated here, so that's good, but we're trying to figure out what are the new dynamics. In any case, log in online and come in person this Sunday. We look forward to seeing you all. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Enjoy the rest of your day.